Hi, this is Jack Hindle,
And this is Shannon McAdam.
and we're having conversations that push the edges and depths of our understanding of faith and discipleship.
Conversations that push us to grab a second cup of whatever beverage we're drinking. Each episode, we'll be just exploring a different question together. Questions like,
Is there a difference between being a good person and being Christ-like?
what does it mean to be religious?
What happens when we die, and why might it matter?
Do you have to be religious to live a good life? Maybe you have a question you'd like us to explore, dear listener. Feel free to send it to us, and you can email those to me at smcadam@seaofchrist.org. That's smcadam at COFCHRIST.org. I almost feel like I should start singing that camp song. I am a C.
Oh,
I am a CH. I am a CHRISTIAN.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, a shout out to campfire leaders everywhere.
That's from SpongeBob.
So, Jack, you had some question. I don't know. I think this might have been one of our first questions that we even came up with. So, do you want to get us started today with that question?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So it's kind of the first question we talk about, which is there a difference between being Christ-like and being a good person? So a couple notes that I have right here just to start us off with for as far as the conversation goes. I think the first thing is obviously it kind of just depends on your definition of both. It's kind of like as a blanket thing, but everyone has a different opinion on I think what it means to be a good person. I think we all have a consensus of sorts, but I do think there is still differences, and then even more so, I don't know if there's even necessarily a huge consensus on what it means to be Christ-like. I think that one is even more, depending on who you ask. And then the other thing that I have here is that I do think what often I know is the nuance of it all. I think often when it means to be Christ-like, a lot of people, myself included, often think of the purpose of evangelizing people, of converting people. And does having that mindset and that way of being, does that make you a good person to try to evangelize people? And I would argue not very much necessarily. And I yeah, I don't think they're truly that connected. Um, but that's why we're here to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know, maybe let's put on our imaginary whiteboard the things that
Yeah.
we think make a good person.
Okay.
I would say someone who doesn't only think of themselves or
Right.
like when they're doing something, they don't think of just the impact of themselves. They think of how what they do is going to impact other people.
Right. Yeah, I would definitely put putting others first, living your life in the service of others. I would think that I think everyone has their own school of thought, but I do think the idea that for me personally, like the way I want to put myself out there in this world is about bringing a lot of joy to people and trying to bring a lot of peace to people. There's a song lyric that talks about how some people will never have peace in their lives. So I will fight with light, till my dying. I forget the exact lyric, but it's like that idea of like that a lot of people will never find peace in their life.
Mhm.
So trying to be someone that does everything you can to bring moments of joy or like bubbles. Nothing's gonna stick forever necessarily, but to bring those bubbles and those moments of peace and joy. So
I think one of the things that's always striking about, I think that sets joy aside from happiness is there's like a surprise element to joy or a
sure.
temporariness to joy. So I love
Right.
that you name that as like spreading joy is part of what makes someone a good person, or helping other people feel peaceful or find some
Yeah.
peace makes you a good person. Like trying to create those feelings for others. I love those ideas. Those are great.
Yeah.
And
But
that,
and that can be also weaponized. So it just depends on how you do it.
yeah,
But
well, say
yeah.
more about that.
Well, what I mean is I think that if I were to use, I'll just go ahead. I'll use a very, current thing.
Mhm.
I think is slightly gone a little bit by the wayside, but I don't know if it should. But with everything going on with Israel and Palestine,
Mm.
uh, specifically like the idea of like, oh, well, all these terrible things are happening. Let's just talk about these cat videos or whatever. Like let's like talk
Okay.
about peace and joy in these sense, and let's forget about all these things. That's what I mean by it can be weaponized, because it's like you want to bring people peace and joy, but you don't want to be obfuscating
Yeah.
others' suffering by distracting them, so on. So that's what I meant, and yeah, so
Yeah, there's room for all of it. There's room for I think sometimes we get so serious that we forget to add some
right. That's
joy and enjoyment. But at the same
right.
time, if all we're doing is, gosh, I like in some of the spirituality circles I've been in, they'd call it spiritual bypassing, which is like good
Okay.
vibes only. I'm not going to think about the bad
Mm,
things. I'm only going
right.
to be in positive energy, and that will but I think then, but my counter argument to that goes back to that first thing that we said makes a good person
Yeah.
is someone who thinks about others. Because if all
Right.
I'm
Okay.
doing is
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
positive, positive all the time, I'm not
Mhm.
actually thinking about others. So, um, a family member once was
Yeah.
talking about how, if people only think like manifest positivity and think positive thoughts, good things will come to them, right? He was like a
Right.
big proponent of this idea. And I was getting really frustrated with that. And so I finally said to him, it's like, so the woman in rural Africa who has to walk
Mm.
miles and miles and miles to get water and is in fear for her life, and is fear of getting raped, and is in fear of her
Mhm.
children's lives. If she just thought positive thoughts and manifested positivity, her life would
Right.
be better. Is that what
Right.
you're telling me? He's like, "Oh,
Right.
well, I mean, I don't mean those situations." I'm like, "Yeah, but when you make like
Mhm. A
generalizations
declarative
like that,
statement. Yeah.
you're
Right.
assuming that gosh, you're gonna hear my true thoughts here. It's like that's really comfortable for you to say as a white male sitting in
Sure.
Canada. It's really easy for you. But even ask your wife, who odds are, or ask any woman whose odds are super high that they've been,
Mhm.
abused in some way in their lives. Like, and
Sure.
if they just thought positive thoughts, they wouldn't have experienced that. Anyway, he got real
Right.
quiet real fast, and I
Yeah.
don't like to use my words those ways. But anyway,
Sure.
um, yeah, there's repercussions to these things. So yes, sparks of joy though. A big transformation I know for me happened in my life when someone gave me the feedback that she's like, I found out that you're actually a really fun person to be around, Shannon, but
Oh, oh,
in
what a
leadership,
backhanded compliment.
when you're in leadership and you're leading something, you're actually really, really serious, and you could probably be a better leader if you had a little bit more joy and a little bit more fun. And the great thing was, is this someone I had a really good relationship with. So the feedback
Okay.
was well received by me. And it really changed the way that I think about things that, like, oh, I don't actually have to be super serious and put on this facade
Mm,
of the perfectly person who knows how to say all the right things at the right time, that it is
yeah.
okay to make a little joke and make fun of myself a bit. So, anyway. Yeah,
I
sparking
gotcha.
joy, spreading peace.
I
One of the
think, which
things.
I'm not blind. I know those are very powerful words in the community of Christ lore, if you will.
I
Joy and
was
peace. So
literally
I'm
just
not
writing an article the other day saying, like, I want to be the hope bringer to spark on those
sure,
words again,
sure.
those community of Christ words.
Yeah.
Joy, hope, peace, and love. Because I've been watching these little videos lately about a woman who's doing kind of educating people about media literacy and things like that. And she's like, one of the things they want you to do is not have hope anymore. for the world. She's like, but I have loads of hope, and when yours is getting weak, you can have some of mine.
Oh
And
my
I'm like,
gosh.
oh my gosh,
Oh,
how generous. I'm like, that's who I want to be for people. Like when your
right.
hope is getting weak,
Yeah.
I have tons. You can have some of mine.
That'll be probably something I'll keep for the rest of my life, is that sentence right there that you just told me. Wow. That's going to make me emotional. That's really special. Yeah. Yeah. That's wonderful.
Well, okay.
um,
Okay, more
yeah.
things on the whiteboard of being a good person. So something about these joy, hope, love, and peace words.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a campfire song right there. Um, yeah, I mean, I think most people would agree that these, it's all, standing up for others, fighting on the behalf of those who may not have a voice. I think those are maybe um, some big ones. I mean, you can probably encompass it all with, joy, love, hope, and peace. For the most part, I think so.
Well, I always
I think.
so
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I would say like, what does it look like or sound like?
Mm. Well, joy's like a river. So
You know
that's
exactly what it looks like.
good.
I thought joy was like
Right.
a fountain.
But joy's like, you're. Oh gosh, you're right. Joy is like a fountain. What is like a river? Is it peace is like a river? That
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Peace is like a river. Joy like. Yeah.
For those
um,
of you who can't see, because this is a podcast, Jack is now doing the hand
the
gestures
hand
to this
signals.
song
Yeah.
to help remember, which I
Right.
100% do myself as well.
Right. Right. Um, I don't know if there's any other like overarching giant concepts that can't be touched by those things as what makes
Mm.
a good person. I do think that, not to switch it over completely, but I do think, yeah, being Christ-like is a lot more. There's a lot more variables.
Mm.
Uh, I think on that one,
I would
because
say, no, go
yeah.
ahead.
What would you say? Because I would actually, I think you have a more interesting opinion than probably me on that.
I think your opinions are interesting too, Jack. So
Uh,
I was going to say, I think the things we've described to me describe the Jesus that I know from the New Testament. Like someone
sure.
who stood up for other people, who
Right.
listened to others, who tried to actually, even, I wonder if this is one of the other things that makes for a good person. I'm thinking about the story of Jesus meeting the woman, and
Mhm, mhm,
she's asking him questions. He basically is like, I'm not going to teach you because you're not really worthy. And he kind of compares her to a dog. And she comes
mhm,
back and says, even the dogs eat the scraps at the master's table. Like, snap.
mm,
Uh, and
mhm.
Jesus is like, oh, and then he does like say this woman has a lot of faith, and he does like end up kind of sharing and teaching and talking with her. So I would say, and in that moment, it's a moment of like Jesus changing his mind about something.
That's a real rare. Don't know if I nodded because I was thinking of something else. And then you kept going. I'm like, oh, I don't know this. I don't think I've ever really heard of that before.
So
So that is a real
I
different, even
wonder,
in that sentence, the very, like, I've never heard anyone teach, like, oh, there's this one moment where Jesus said, this person is a dog. Like, ooh, oh,
I know it's not the Jesus that they teach about in Sunday school necessarily.
no,
Um,
no.
but so I wonder if one of the qualities of a good person is someone who's willing to change their mind.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Yeah. I was writing for a separate thing,
Mhm.
completely unrelated, but it's right here in my notes because I was writing it at around the same time. And it was like the start of a little bit of a poem, just a little bit. But I wrote inflexibility of the mind, cavernous souls with nowhere to go. Um, but I do think about like some people, like, if only their mind could be a little bit more flexible in some ways, in certain ways,
Yeah.
which I'm sure, as I've been told that I'm very stubborn, which I don't know if you would have seen that yet, but it actually is very much there. Um, uh, Anyways, all that to say is that I know many people have probably in my life, especially my parents, was like, I wish he could just be a little bit more flexible with his mind. On like, something to do with like, I think back when I was younger, it was like I didn't want to wear dressed up clothes for church. I wanted to wear basketball shorts. And I didn't win that battle, which now looking back, I wish I, you know, wasn't so intense with my mom about that. But I do think my mom would be like, if only he could just relax his mind. But then, when I'm at that age, I'm like, well, if only my mom could change her mind. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah,
It,
but I think that's really interesting what you said, though. Sorry, I'm a rambler. I apologize.
no, I love that. It made me think of this story of when um my sibling Joy was like 3 and started
Yeah,
refusing to wear dresses and like
yeah.
especially to church. Although there was this one
Mm.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle dress that Joy would
Oh,
absolutely wear.
heck yeah.
But but was so principled in this I will not wear dresses that when my a friend wanted Joy to be in their wedding, uh
Yeah.
Joe was like, "Do I have to wear a dress?" They're like, "Yeah." Joe's like, I don't want to be in your wedding then." And
Dang.
but then when my aunt and uncle wanted Joy in their wedding, they were like, my aunt was really smart. She's like, "So Joy, what would you be comfortable wearing? What would you like to wear?"
Mm.
And Joe was like, "Tuxedos are cool." And my aunt's like, "Awesome. We're renting a tuxedo for your cousin anyway. We'll just rent two. It's not a problem." Anyway,
Um,
um,
yeah.
I don't know why I felt need to tell that story. Because Joy passed away, I love to tell Joy stories
Oh,
and things
yeah.
like that.
Right.
But yeah, those like principled things that we don't compromise on. I think stubbornness has its place sometimes.
I do. I would agree. I would agree. But I do think it's really interesting of like picking those battles in terms of a good person,
Mm,
because one person asked Joy, right? What's her name?
yeah.
Yeah. One person asked Joy, and she was like, "Well, I'm not wearing a dress," and then that was that. Whereas another person was like, "Okay, well, you know, let's figure out what's a different solution here." Because you still have to dress up in a way, but maybe there's a different world. And she was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to do this." And I wonder if that first person had asked that, if it would have been the same situation. So,
Yeah, it does. It's interesting
uh,
about like when we get more, I think it comes back to your little beginning of a
yeah,
poem there of like when we allow for flexibility in our thinking about things and maybe allow for some more spaciousness that we can maybe strengthen relationships in ways that aren't possible if we're too rigid in our thinking.
right, yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. What would you say? Is there any other? Is there anything that contributes to someone being Christ-like that wouldn't contribute to them being a good person, or not necessarily like it takes away from them being a good person, but it's like it's just not like you don't have to be a good person to do this, but you do have to be Christ-like to do this.
That's a
Do you
good
think there's anything there? And maybe maybe not.
Mm. That's a really good question. I'm trying to think. So, like classical theology, what makes Christ different? There's
Yeah.
this idea that he was both fully human and fully divine. I don't know that we can talk about that for people. I don't know.
Sure.
That's part
Yeah.
of the idea, but there is something there for me, something about acknowledging the presence of God in life.
Mm.
Um, that I maybe this is scandalous for no, not scandalous for me. This is it might be difficult for some people to hear, but I don't think you necessarily need to believe in God in order to be a good person. Like I think you can be a good person
Mm.
and make a good contribution to the world without um, you know, believing in God. I even think maybe I'm going to test out this idea that a person could be like a follower of Jesus and maybe not buy into the whole Christianity thing. Maybe they don't believe in
Mm.
God, but they see Jesus as like a man in history who stood up for the oppressed and
Right.
kind of tried to overturn the tables of power in the world. And they're like,
Yeah.
I want to model my life after this person, but I don't necessarily want to buy into the whole believing in God thing.
Right. Or like resurrection and all that.
Yeah, or like Jesus
Right.
died for to save us from our sins, that kind of
Right.
classical theology. Now, what do you mean by save? What do
Yeah.
you mean by sins? Those are
Sure.
all, like, to me, up for grabs kind of questions of how you interpret
Right.
that. But yeah, I wonder if someone could be Christ-like and be a good person and not buy into the whole kind of worldview that there's this God entity in the world.
Right. I think it's interesting because to me, I would not have thought that would be any sort of hard pill to swallow for someone to be a good person but not believe in God. To me, it would be like, "Oh, yeah, of course. There's plenty of people out there like that." But I guess
Exactly.
that
I know
for
tons
some
of them.
people, that would be very much, I guess, a pill. I think a good example if we're going with other, religions and everything, ironically, maybe in some sense, would be Buddha.
Mm.
I think Buddha, in a lot of ways, seemingly very Christ-like. I would argue a very, like, from what we know and everything, a good person, slash entity to some degree. Um, but I guess that also has the divinity aspect.
Yeah, I think
But yeah.
in Buddhism, there's not necessarily the same understanding of what we would call God in like the Judeo-Christian Muslim traditions. Um, I don't think it's the same idea in Buddhism. Like, there's definitely some aspects of divinity, but it's not, I wouldn't say it equates exactly to what happens in that.
Right. No, yeah. That's very fair. That's
But you're
fair.
right that there's, I think I would definitely call Buddha a good person, almost even Christ-like, and believing in the Judeo-Christian God wasn't part of how the Buddha made
Right.
sense of the world, right? He came to
Right.
the
Yeah.
conclusions about people and things and how we see the world through a different path than through that Judeo-Christian God worldview.
Right. Okay. I think I saw somewhere that there was this thing about how most of the holy books from all over the world say pretty much the same thing about being a good person.
The do unto others as you would have done unto you, the golden
Yeah.
rule. There's
Or how they would want them done upon themselves for the platinum, I think, rule.
yeah,
Um,
in most spiritual and religious traditions, you find that same guiding principle of
yeah, a through line of
what it
sorts.
means to be, yeah, a good person for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So then I guess
Do
it
you
does.
Mhm.
No, go
Oh,
ahead.
no, go ahead, sorry.
I was saying, I guess it does come down to those questions about like what then makes being a follower of Christ and being a Christian um, different. I think we agree that you're not a better person because you're a Christian than just someone
Right,
who's a good person, regardless of what they believe. I think you and I both are aligned
yeah,
on that. But it does beg the question then, like, why then? Why bother? Why bother? Or
mm,
what's different when someone decides to, I don't know, be a Christian in one of the many Christian movements that are out there?
right. I would agree. I would agree with that's a very good question. I do think something that as I've been growing and, becoming the adult that I am starting to become. I just turned 26, by the way. Just for those who, I don't know if I mentioned it on the first episode or not, my age, but so as someone who's in their mid-20s, I think what I sometimes find frustrating is that there seems to be a lot of ways, especially in today with internet and everything, as far as like physical places and meeting people in a physical space, it's very hard to find like big communities or a strong community without there having to be a religion involved. And I think a lot of people are like, they very much want that strong community. So they're like, well, this is the place to find it. These are the place to find people that I know will, if I have a flat tire, I can call them And if
Oh,
they have a flat
right.
tire, I can call them or they can call me, I
Right,
meant
like
to
by
say.
belonging to a church where you know
Yeah.
that people are gonna show up for you.
And you can find purpose in showing up for them and so on
Mhm.
and so forth. So I do think like that is why not everyone, I think, again, generalizations, not meaning to be absolutes, but I do think there is something there about like, oh, I can have my family here. These are good people. I can raise my kids in these environments. It gives them a backbone of morality, so on and so forth. That in a the more secular world doesn't have those seemingly strong things or like community centers that bind them in the same way because
Mm.
church or religion is such a strong binding force, which I think gets away from what we were originally talking about. But
No, I think you bring up a really good point though, because I think part of our, right, like we've just said that part of being a good person is thinking about others. And I would say one of the ways that you learn about what others' needs are and how you can help other people is through communities, right? Is that's where
yeah, yeah, yeah,
why the rubber hits the road. And so if you don't have that kind of community that you're a part of, then how do you um kind of get not just get help when you need it, but also develop your self in offering help to other people
right, and
that
giving
you're
back, yeah.
actually like in relationship with, so that it's not just a saviorism of like, oh, I'm going to go in and help
Mm,
those people who are needy. It's
mm,
actually no,
yeah,
those people, quote unquote, are part of my community. Like they are my people. So how do we kind of do that differently if we don't have communities? And I think this has been if I put on my like sort of academic theology, sociology hat,
yeah,
this has been a
absolutely,
question for like decades now. There's this famous book written called Bowling Alone, like bowling as in the sport of bowling,
yeah.
when and that person kind of tracks the waning of the bowling league as being like one of the places where people found community and people started bowling by
Mm,
themselves instead of in groups. That's where the name Bowling Alone comes from, but kind of
mm,
points out to this whatever it is, the over individualizing thing that has happened in our culture. But
right.
what I'm seeing with a lot of I don't want to say just younger people, because I see this I think across many generations, is that really like longing for community and belonging in places where you
Right.
can connect with other people. So it's interesting that you name that people will go to religion for that. Maybe, and I think maybe I'm reading too much into it, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost sounded like even if I was someone that's looking for that kind of community, I might not believe everything that I'm
Mhm.
quote unquote supposed to believe in
Right.
to belong to this
Yeah.
community. But belonging to community is so important to me that I'm willing to kind of sacrifice my
Sure.
not believing the same things to be able to have a community of belonging to be part of.
Yeah, I think that happens.
Mm.
And I think that happens not for, again, not everyone, but I think that does exist. And I know I used the word frustration earlier. For me, what I'm more so am trying to say is that I will find moments where, because I moved away from my hometown.
Mm.
So all my friends, and again, everyone's growing up and everyone's starting to leave. We were just the first ones, me and my wife, and we have some friends here, but it's not the same. It's not the same where you lived your whole life and built, long, decade plus old friendships. With all that said, it is like moments where I'm like, oh, sure, like there are, churches and everything where I can meet people and do these things, but I would love to find interest that I would, how do I want to say it? I wish there was more. It was more easy to find like a hiking club, and they exist. There's clubs for like board games or so on, and there's all these things that exist. But it's hard to sometimes put yourself out there because usually it's a group of friends, and then you're going to be that first person to kind of be like, "Hey, I would love to join this activity," and it can be a little daunting, unfortunately. It just can be. So I guess that's more so what I mean, where it's like,
Mhm.
it is fascinating that I'm like, oh, how important these third spaces, I think they're what
Yeah.
they're called,
Yeah.
how important they are. And I work in Parks and Rec, so I work at a recreation center, and I get to see that so many people come to my water aerobics classes. I think I don't know if they necessarily enjoy water aerobics, but they have 100. It's like a group of 30 plus people. They have definitely developed. They have group chats. It's all these older people that kids aren't near their worlds as much as they probably wished, or maybe they wished. I won't make any generalizations. And their parents are definitely no longer living. It's just them. Maybe they have family that's also no longer living. So they probably feel very isolated, and they come to water aerobics, or they come to pickleball or whatever, and they find that. So I just wish it was even more readily available and more of an obvious thing, not something that it takes so much to figure out. I
Yeah.
guess.
I
Yeah.
think too, and I want to make sure that there's nobody like when I was talking about how folks that might join like a church or start hanging at a church, even if
Right.
the beliefs don't align with their own, I don't judge that at all. I think that is
Yeah, sure.
totally
Yeah.
like there is space at the table for everyone. And to me,
Right.
like
Yeah.
belonging in a group, we're not like checking, like, I'm not checking people's beliefs at the door. Like, I don't think that as
Yeah, no,
long
yeah,
as
yeah.
you're not like using your beliefs to hurt someone else, you can believe whatever you like, as far as I'm
Right, right.
concerned. It comes down to that, which makes a good
Disclaimer.
question. But I
Disclaimer,
really
yeah.
like that you raised this up because I would say this is probably one of the contextual differences. So we've talked about how where I am, it's a much more secular culture. So there aren't like people don't think of churches as the place to go for community building or for finding
Mm.
those kind of third spaces. There probably are more things like, I don't know, hiking clubs or reading groups or board game meetups and things like
Yeah,
that, because there are more people that are longing for community. But that said, I don't think it is makes it any easier. There's still
sure.
that difficulty in how do you figure out, who your people are and who you can trust and how
Mm.
do you build that. I've been really interested to see more and more lately. There's books coming out and things on social media about like how to make friends and how to like build community because it
Right,
feels like, and I do think the COVID pandemic had something to do with this, as we kind of like forgot in some
right.
ways how to meet up in person and how to do that. And there's probably like a generation of folks who missed out on that time when, quote, normally, unquote, I don't want to generalize, but people would be
Yeah.
like moving out and getting their first place and inviting people over. And we weren't
I
allowed to do that,
yeah,
right? And so
I
we all
was
kind of had to like
20.
relearn.
Yeah, I was in the middle of college when all that happened, which is a huge part for all those things to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's something I think that you've touched on here that is important, which I think then comes back to, because I don't want to lose sight of it. And I
I know.
know, is
Easy
this
to.
question that you said about evangelism, right?
Right.
Which is
Mhm.
like, I would say if I were to step way back, I would
Mhm.
say it's inviting someone into community, right? Like in
Okay.
my, now, probably when we think evangelism, we think getting people baptized so that we
Converted.
can save their souls or
Right.
something along that
Right,
line.
right, 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 right.
Whereas when I think about invitation, and which is how I like to think about evangelism these days, and just
Okay.
like this topic makes me super uncomfortable, which is why I'm glad we're talking about it because I think it's important to talk about
Right.
uncomfortable things that so I had this experience in the fall as my in my new job of being an apostle in Community of Christ. I was at an event where there were a lot of like spiritual seekers or people questioning their beliefs from their
Okay.
tradition and talking about the things they found difficult about their tradition. And I wanted to evangelize more than I have ever wanted to in my life because I wanted to say, hey, there's this church called Community of Christ that would be
Yeah.
so welcoming of you and your questions and your wonderings and your beliefs. And it's not perfect either, but it is a place where you could explore these questions safely that you feel like you're afraid to ask in the tradition that you're in right now. And I had
Sure.
never been so compelled. Now, I didn't do it because that's not why I was at the event. I was not there to evangelize or steal sheep, as one person put it. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, it was really interesting to like notice that those thoughts and feelings coming up in me that I hadn't experienced
right.
strongly before, as to just wanting to share. Gosh, I think the only word I can describe is like the good news. I know we talk, that's like kind of a loaded Christian term, but like
Sure.
just
Sure.
wanting to share with people there is a place for you. And
Mm,
so while I think the way evangelism has worked to like start wars and oppress
mm,
people is really bad. If
mhm.
there's a lonely person in my life whose life could be made better by me having the courage to invite them to a church potluck or even just
Right.
invite them to my house for a meal, um,
Right.
I do wonder if evangelism is maybe not quite as black and white as I once thought it was.
Do you think that evangelism can be so simple as just inviting people, or does it need to have the goal of some sort of converting, demonstrating, and agreeing upon a worldview?
That's so good of a question. For me, I think maybe that's the difference between invitation versus evangelism, is that
Okay. Sure.
evangelism has that goal of like conversion. But I also start to, it makes me think about the word conversion. And
Mhm.
are there people in my life who I know have maybe oppressive attitudes about other people that
Mhm.
I would actually like them to convert their thinking to be
Sure.
more
Inclusive.
accepting and inclusive
Mhm.
if I thought that getting them baptized in Community of Christ might get them there. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I
Sure.
would. Maybe I would. Again, me
Okay.
maybe being overly optimistic or idealistic. I want to allow for that kind of possibility. Now, do I think that if they if they don't get baptized by January next year, I'm not inviting them anymore. No, no,
Right.
absolutely not. I
Right.
just wonder if, because this is so like coming from my perspective where I never felt super pressured into like getting
Mhm.
baptized, I never
Mhm.
felt super pressured to believe a certain way
Right.
that I maybe come at it from a different angle than someone who felt pressure or felt like the social pressure or like you don't
Right.
belong unless you say these right things or do these or like but belong to this community. I might have a very different kind of take on things.
I so I have a very quick story about this type of thing, and the compare it has nothing to do with church, but I think very much the comparisons are there,
Mm,
and you could probably easily make those, like, connections. So when I first got into college, you have to do orientations and all these things, and, we have our orientation leaders. I will call him Jake. Jake was our orientation group leader, and he was super friendly, super outgoing. He wanted everyone's number so that if we ever had any questions about classes, getting around campus, needed someone to talk to about, adjusting to a college lifestyle and all of this stuff, or just, living life in college and not, not being in school or high school, all that stuff, that we could always reach out to him. So we got his number, he got our number. All this to say, he was a part of a fraternity, and I didn't know this at the time. He was the president of a one of the fraternities at school, and so he would eventually, occasionally reach out to like me, and he would text me about they had this event, this event, this event, and the first three I genuinely just couldn't go to. I had either class, or I had like a family thing, or I had other plans. So I just, like, it wasn't even like I didn't want to go. I actually did want to go, but I had prior obligations, so I just simply couldn't go. And then one time he texted me like, "Hey." It's rush week. Like, really would love you to join. Blah 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 blah. And I was like, oh no, I'm not interested in joining a fraternity. But I really appreciate you, and I definitely please like want to keep in contact. I know I haven't been able to go to any of the events, but blah 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 blah. And then I never heard from him again.
Oh,
Once I was like, oh, I'm like, my intent is not to join the fraternity, everything stopped. All communication ceased. And then it dawned on me. I was like, oh, there's a bigger reason here. Which again, I think the comparisons speak for themselves. And I don't think everyone's like that. I don't want to say that's, experiences across the board for anything. But I do think when I think of evangelism, I do think of that.
yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And I think it speaks volumes about, gosh, I could go even deeper into this, but like about something like deeply human about like wanting to
Mhm.
belong, but
Yeah.
also that us and them kind of thing that becomes really easy to fall into for someone like him who's like, oh, I'm going to stop investing time in this person because I can't convert them to my thing,
Right.
not thinking about the impact it has on that actual person who now
Mhm.
feels like rejected because they,
Yeah.
because I'm not that you felt rejected, but like I could totally see how,
Yeah.
like,
It was like,
maybe there's
oh.
maybe you have other social circles, other people you can participate with, but
Mhm.
maybe there was someone who's like really lonely, and maybe you were someone
Right.
who didn't have any other social connections, and then to be rejected just because you won't join this special club, like that
Right.
could be like really hurtful to a person. So I'm really glad you gave that example because I think it says something about the importance of being in relationship with people, regardless of whether they think the same way or believe the same way
Sure.
or
Yeah.
follow the same path as you do, because in the end, we need each other as human
Yeah.
beings. And if we just reject someone because they don't want to adopt the same worldview as us, imagine what we're missing out on in terms of relationship and how we could. Anyway, yeah,
Sure.
that's a really thoughtful example. I'm glad you shared it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but I would imagine that I think there is often a goal within organized religions is to keep those memberships up,
Mm,
um, keep those donations up.
yeah.
Um, and I think that often there is a mindset of like, well, maybe it's not so much about, well, it is about, I think, especially, depending on where you go, it is often about, trying to get that spiritual enrichment, but that might be seen even as equal to making sure we keep getting people into doors and people into seats and, you know, making sure we
Yeah.
develop the strongest speech of the night is going to be for the disciples' generous response. Like that's going to be where the real thought goes in for the night, maybe. And again, generalizations like this is not, I don't want to, I don't want it to
There's
be
this
too offensive,
there's this
but
great book that I read, and I don't
yeah.
know why I didn't think of it sooner. It's called Querying Evangelism, like
Mm.
Queer.
Mhm. Mhm.
Querying Evangelism. And it's this woman who is a United Church of Canada minister who decided that her goal for her congregation, rather than trying to increase the numbers, was
Mhm.
that it would be a safe place for people to be the queerest version of themselves. So for
Okay.
some people, that might mean they can come to church in drag, or that they can come to
Yeah.
church expressing the gender identity of their,
Right.
or it might mean they can come to church like they can hold the hand of their girlfriend if they're a woman, or like, different ways.
Right.
But it also could mean for someone who's like hetero straight that they can be as silly as they want, or it means like they can wear the outlandish clothing that they really wish they could wear, but they
Sure.
don't because they're trying to be more straight-laced in there. It's just like there's different ways
Right.
that we can show our queerest selves. And she's like, my goal was to see if that was my goal to make
Mm.
it a safe place, would the numbers increase on their own? And they did.
Mm.
And
I,
there were more people
yeah.
that came. And so I always think of that example of like what is it that we're striving towards? Like what is it? Because it's a really
Mm.
hard, and I'm so glad you have this attention that I hold all the time because there's this institution of Community of Christ that I'm
Mhm.
very much in
Yeah.
a key role in now in my life
Right.
of keeping it going, partly because
Right.
it's the place where I've found so much meaning and so much
Sure.
life and a place where I can be myself and bring. I say that one of the things I love most about this job is I feel like I give my whole self at work in a way I've never been
Mm.
able to in my life before. I bring all of who I am to what I do now. But at the same time, I follow Jesus, whose path was the path of dying and
Mm.
wounding and letting go of everything.
Mm.
So there's this tension for me between that kind of, I don't know, that cultural notion of keeping things alive
Yeah.
versus that idea of it is through and dying that we have new life. And so
Mm.
what things need to be let go of, what things need to die in order for new life to happen. Um,
Right.
could there be some day when this beloved institution I hold, I have to let go of? I don't know. That scares me. It scares
Mm.
me to think about
Sure.
it. But is that the call? Is that the call of Christianity is to walk that path? So
Mm.
it's a weird, it's a hard one. But I do
Yeah.
think if we are truly walking with people in the midst of their and not trying to offer easy questions and easy answers, but actually sharing
Yeah.
genuine community, that we're more likely to be that like show up as your queerest self version of evangelism rather than the
Yeah.
just trying to keep the institution alive.
I think it's interesting because I know, and part of it is like, having maybe more of a bombastic way of saying like almost the realist self. Because
Mm,
that's like what it sounds like. It's like the queer self, but for the straight people coming in, it's like just being as you as you want to be,
yes, yes.
um, which sounds really lovely and sweet. Yeah,
Well,
yeah. I
I wonder if this was kind of our resting place for this episode.
think it might be.
These are some really good questions. I'm so glad we had this chance to talk around.
Yeah, thank you. I'm definitely gonna keep the hope. Like that'll probably like literally stick with me the rest of my life. That
Uh,
was very special. Thank you for that.
you're welcome. And all you listeners out there, if you are losing hope, you can have some of mine. I have plenty to share. We're in this together. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.